Hello, good evening. Live from Denver. It is Friday night. Welcome to Critical Conversations. Let me make sure that this all is well and good. Thank you very much for confirming that in the comments. And this is Critical Conversations for the 17th of September in the year of our Lord 2021. Yes, that's right. And I am joined by, as always, or mostly always, and always happy to be joined by my beautiful wife, Melissa.
Hello.
Hey, critics. How you guys doing out there? I see we have all the usual suspects in the comment section, and I am so happy to see all of you and hear from you. It is a wonderful little community that we have formed up here, and I could not be happier about it. And I was last week sort of throwing a few sort of chummy or sort of chum tweets out, you know, hey, nobody ever calls and argues with me. Nobody, you know, we never have irreconcilable differences on my show. You know. And, you know, whatever, maybe somebody will call in and give us a ration of whatever. But so far, this has been just fun and games all around. And I have really enjoyed the experience. And I wanted to kind of say those words out loud. Mm-hmm. Because also this gives me an opportunity to highlight and show the rest of you guys what I already have known and learned and fallen in love with, which is this wonderful lady here who is multi-talented. And I mean, you guys might not know. She's a film school grad. This is I'm doing a master's program. She has done a master's program in script writing, and she is an all-around amazing person. Mm-hmm.
That's right.
That's right. That's right.
Keep that in mind. No.
Now, all that ego massaging to the side. This is going to be kind of a fun show because the bulk of the show this week is going to be Melissa's, because this was this topic that we are taking up this week on handling grief and dealing with grief. This is a show that, oh, hey, Steve. Hey, everybody. Hey, One Track Mind. All right. Get a room. This is mostly her brainchild this week. Okay, we both had this has been a rougher week than usual in some respects. You know, depression doesn't necessarily ask permission before it opens the door and lets itself into your life. Mm-hmm. And some days are better than others. And I think that's been true for both of us this week in one degree or another. And of course, there was the loss.
Yes, a big loss for comedy this week.
Yeah, Norm Macdonald passed. He was a wonderful comedian, Saturday Night Live alumni, and had a show on Netflix for a while, I think a year or two ago. And always a bit of an odd character as far as I was concerned.
Very interesting sense of humor, yeah.
Yes, but consistently, you know, funny in interesting ways. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and that sort of actually kind of hit both of us a little bit unexpectedly. And so this topic seemed relevant and important to discuss. And because we talk about these things a lot.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and she was saying some things, and then it was like, well, how about we actually look up some of this stuff and talk about this in some detail? And so we've got a show for you guys this week with this. So, of course, before I turn everything over to you and stop, you know, incessantly prattling on here, we do need to check in with Seven, because we did get 7 Cam, and here is our first round of OT7 for the week.
Aww.
Yes, our little furry bundle of joyous love. You can see him kind of chilling in our guest bathroom.
Yeah,
now.
that's one of his favorite places.
It is. It seems to be the place that he spends more time than any other single place, I think. Mm-hmm. I mean, when we're around, he'll hang in the living room and stuff sometimes too, but he will spend a fantastic amount of time in that room there. So does Seven ever feel grief?
Well, you know, I don't know that Seven has. He might have grieved when my sister's cat Bowie had to leave Then they lived together, but I didn't notice too much of that. I will say that I do believe cats in general grieve, because when I was a kid, I had 2 cats, Izzy and Spice, from junior high up until high school. And when Izzy died, Spice crawled under the couch and made very strange meowing noises for 2 weeks. So I'm guessing that was him grieving in whatever cat way that you do.
Yeah.
But it was not a normal behavior for him.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, of course, I will acknowledge Heihan put in the comments that Britain also had a loss this week with Sir Clive Sinclair. And I remember I saw a headline about that. I wasn't aware of his accomplishments in the computer world, but apparently he was quite the pioneer, and he passed of, I think, natural circumstances. He was in his 80s, I think, over there. So not quite as tragic as
young.
Hidden cancer at 61 that nobody knew was coming or happening, Yeah, exactly, Henny. We're still in some ways reeling from Anthony Bourdain.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yes, cool. I have some bad news for you this week, Steve. I'm taking the weekend off. Okay, so this weekend, and I'll say this again at the end of the show, but this weekend there will not be a podcast or a Q&A. I'm taking that time
I'll need
off.
a break sometimes.
Kind of do, and this time seemed best. Rather than try to hack something out that doesn't really have the quality or meaning that I want, I thought, I'm going to skip it for this week. Okay, guys. So, yes, thank you, Heihan. All right, so with all of that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mel.
All right. He already covered some stuff, so I might have to improvise a little here. So, grief. Grief is the normal process of reacting to a loss, albeit death of a loved one, death of a pet, the end of a relationship, an estrangement, a loss of a job, or even the death of a dream you held dear. There are so many ways to grieve and so many things to grieve for, but we will all face grief at some point in our life. There's no escaping it, but there are ways to endure it and come out the other side of it still mostly intact. All right, so we already kind of discussed this, but the reason that we brought up grief this week is because of Norm Macdonald passing, and we'll get to it in a minute, but there's a kind of a reason why that's affecting me. So we'll get into that and what that kind of made me realize this week. But I do know that grief is a difficult and painful topic, but one thing I've learned the most about grief is that expressing it with others can be the most healing and beautiful process. I have grieved so many times in so many different ways for people, pets, places, etc. I'm sure you have too. So let's all give each other a little virtual hug before we begin. We already did the 7 cams, so we'll start with some Norm Macdonald stuff.
All right, so pulling up the special Norm graphic here.
Yeah, you can see it. We made a little Norm graphic. We have him doing Weekend Update. This lovely picture, I'm not sure it's from, but it's an older him, probably more recently. Yeah. And then, of course, Burt Reynolds on Celebrity Jeopardy.
Some of our favorite Saturday Night Live sketches were the Celebrity Jeopardy.
Yes.
They were quite good.
I did that with your mother last night, Trebek.
Yes, that's right. Saw your mother last night, Trebek. She was awesome. She said to say hi.
All right. So back to Norm.
Yes.
So just a few facts about him. He was born October 17th, 1959 in Quebec City, Canada. So I knew he was a Canadian, but I didn't know he was from Quebec. So I found that interesting that I learned that this week. As most of you know, he passed away on Tuesday of this week, September the 14th. He wrote a semi-truthful autobiography, and that's okay to say because he's the one who says that, because he called it Based on a True Story. You can get that on Amazon. He was known for his deadpan style, and as many fellow comedians have been pointing out, he was always himself. His career started with stand-up around Canada in the 80s. He got hired to write for the original Roseanne in 1992, and his career moved from there. In 93, he started on Saturday Night Live as a writer and cast member. By By 1994, he was already the Weekend Update anchor until 1988 when he was fired, most likely because Don Ohlmeyer did not like his OJ jokes.
And who was that guy?
Don Ohlmeyer was a NBC exec.
Yeah, I think he was the president of NBC Entertainment. And
he was not happy. I think he was also friends with OJ or something.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. They were friends. And so Norm giving OJ shit every week was pissing. Well, he had to hear about it, you know.
Yeah. Because
as with narcissists and such types, they don't like to be criticized or made fun of.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so after Saturday Night Live, after he got fired, his movie Dirty Work came out, which at the time I found funny. I haven't watched it in a really long time, so I don't know if it would hold up. It was kind of one of the, I was in high school when it came out, so. And he had a short-lived sitcom on ABC simply titled Norm for 2 years, 1999 to 2001. He did play Death on Family Guy for quite a while. He was always amusing. And some of his more recent projects were Norm Macdonald has a show where he interviewed other celebrities in his usual quirky Norm way. He was on The Orville as the shapeshifter guy, and he was also in Mike Tyson Mysteries, which was a Adult Swim show on Cartoon Network. So, and you know, I have also, if you go out there on Twitter, I forgot which magazine it is, but there's a Twitter feed of all the comedians that are saying nice things about him and their memories, which I found really touching.
Yeah, it's been, I've been surprised at how many people have been tweeting about or mentioning him. Maybe that's usual whenever a celebrity dies, but I'm seeing more than I thought I would see. And it's been quite heartwarming to see so many of the things people have said about him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even Chris Kattan was a big boy and said nice things, and they didn't always get along. So it's been interesting, yeah. But what I wanted to say was these are all just facts. The truth is Norm Macdonald impacted other people's lives. He left behind a son. He left behind everyone who loved him and everyone who was inspired by him. And what better gift can you give than to inspire others? And that is why his death is kind of hitting me sort of oddly. So the thing is when I was a kid, especially in my teenage years, I was just in love with Saturday Night Live. I got really obsessed with it in high school. It was a capital D dream of mine. And the years that I was watching Saturday Night Live, he was on there, you know. And even though he wasn't necessarily my favorite, I'm going to be honest, because I know he was the kind of person that would want you to be. So he was not my favorite, but he was definitely part of the inspiration. His Weekend Update made me laugh. And, you know, he's a part of the reason why I dreamed that and why it was a capital D dream. And the thing is I went to theater school for that. You know, that's what I got my bachelor's degree in, because I thought that was the first step to getting to Saturday Night Live. And then along the way, things happened, things got in the way. I stopped trying. And I realized this week, like when he died, it just made me think about that again, all the dream that I had of that back then. And I realized that what's making me sad is that I never grieved that dream. I just kind of ignored it, realized it was never going to happen, and then just put it away. But now it's coming back to haunt me that I did that. So, but I want to say, yes, that's a sad realization, but hopefully, it's the slap in the face that I need that will motivate me to go for other dreams that I still can go for, you know? Saturday Night Live is sort of a dead dream. You know, maybe someday I'll get famous enough to host it. Who knows? But I know I'm never going to be a cast member. And so that's one of the reasons it's kind of hard for me. What about you?
In terms of Norm?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I always lament the passing of talent and people who make a positive impact on other people's lives, because they are so, you know, in a way, few and far between, and why we idolize people who can do that, who have that talent and ability, and why we, you know, pay attention to them and want to emulate them is because of that positive impact. And when they're gone, they're not making that anymore. And that's what always hits me hardest, is how much more was there that, that they had in them to produce. Some people, do their deal and they have so much in them and then they're done. And other people, can just keep going, and that they have a whole other things in them that are possible with acting or with theater or with music. I mean, Prince, Bowie, I mean, all these icons who, still had so much more to give. And I feel he was actually kind of in that crowd of people, in his niche talent, which he had, and he was always enjoyable. And I enjoyed watching his shows and seeing him on SNL, before knowing about any of this. It was just, he was just one of those guys that he was just always interesting and enjoyable to watch. And and that's what I'm gonna miss about him. I did not have the same degree of emotional and personal connection, that you did. Yeah. But it's always.
And he was definitely funny and different in his sense of humor, and he wasn't afraid to say the things he said, even if he knew they'd piss a bunch of people off.
Yeah.
But what I've been learning about him, and I realized, until recently, I didn't even know what his political leaning was, because he was so good at keeping it to himself. He never did a lot of political humor, and I kind of respect that about him, is that he just was funny, and he didn't have to make it about politics. Not that I don't like political humor. I love political humor, but it's a cool way to go with it.
That's right. Oh God, his Bob Dole impression.
Oh my God, that was hilarious.
When during the whole campaign, him doing Bob Dole. Those are some classic SNLs you can go back and check out if you have a mind to. He was quite good playing Bob Dole, who is one of the most boring people probably who's ever lived.
Right, and he actually liked Bob Dole. He voted for. Well, I don't know if he was American yet, but he was supporting Bob Dole, at least. I don't know if he was a dual citizen or anything like that. But.
Yeah.
All right.
But he certainly did a good job making fun of him too.
Yeah. But what I want to say is, we all grieve different things right now. And, I know there's been a lot of loss for America in the last year and a half with COVID, and a lot of us are grieving a lot of things. Last week was the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So there's still grief. I
see your comment here, Katrina. I get that 1 year anniversary of her father's death today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wanted to, instead of a quote, I'm going to read some song lyrics, and I'm going to dedicate these not only to Norm Macdonald, but to all of us who have lost, and for all of those who have been lost. So it's called Shadow of the Day. It was originally written by Linkin Park and performed by Linkin Park. This band Echoes does a cover of it, which I would check out if I were you. I'd check out both versions, but the cover is just, if you want to bawl your eyes out, it's great. So here we go. Here's the lyrics. I close both locks below the window. I close both blinds and turn away. Sometimes solutions aren't so simple. Sometimes goodbye's the only way. And the sun will set for you. The sun will set for you. And the shadow of the day will embrace the world in gray. And the sun will set for you. In cards and flowers on your window, your friends all plead for you to stay. Sometimes beginnings aren't so simple. Sometimes goodbye's the only way. And the sun will set for you. The sun will set for you. And the shadow of the day will embrace the world in gray, and the sun will set for you.
Damn.
Yeah. Okay, so on that, I think we could maybe do a little more 7cam.
Yeah, we can
for some joyous moment.
Check that back in with our little bundle of furry love here. Yeah. Yeah, Lincoln Park is yeah, I'm all about that. All right, well, let us check back in with our 7 cam. Up there he is. He persisted.
Yes, he did. Nevertheless, he persisted in napping.
Yes. Yeah, our little, he's our actually, I guess that would be an appropriate time to say as well, of course, that 7 is our emotional support cat.
That definitely.
Yeah, no question about that. He has been wonderful for both of us in, our times of need.
Yes. Through the last 15 years, he has been a very wonderful kitty. And hopefully we get 15 more. I mean, I just saw like a cat turn 32 the other day. So I was like, well, you never know, right?
Stranger things have happened, I suppose.
Be quite an old kitty. All right. We don't have any calls yet?
No, actually, let me throw out there, since Mel's been leading the way here, this is a call-in show, and we would love to hear from you guys on this topic as well. The number 984-214-4154. Feel free to call in. We have prepped stuff, but we are also very cognizant of the fact that this is a call-in show, and the purpose of this is to talk to you guys about these topics as well. So, that being said, continue on.
Okay, so first I was going to talk about the stages of grief. Now, there's the typical 5 stages, which you probably know are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And, you don't necessarily go through those in order. You don't necessarily go through all of them, whatever. But those are the traditional ones. And this article also included the kind of more descriptive and inclusive 7 stages of grief that I like a lot. So the 7 stages of grief are another popular model for explaining the many complicated experiences of loss. These 7 stages include shock and denial. This is a state of disbelief and numbed feelings. Pain and guilt. You may feel that the loss is unbearable and that you're making other people's lives harder because of your feelings and needs. I would also argue that guilt could be, especially depending on the kind of loss, like you might be blaming yourself. What could I have done differently? What can I do differently in the future to prevent something like this from happening? That kind of thing too. Which of course goes into anger and bargaining. You may lash out, telling God or a higher power that you'll do anything they ask if they'll only grant you relief from these feelings. Depression. This may be a period of isolation and loneliness during which you process and reflect on the loss. The upward turn. At this point, the stages of grief, like anger and pain, have died down and you're left in a more calm and relaxed state. Reconstruction and working through. You can begin to put the pieces of your life back together and carry forward. And lastly, acceptance and hope. This is a very gradual acceptance of the new way of life and a feeling of possibility in the future. So I kind of like this because those are more encompassing of, I think, the wide array of things we feel and go through when we are in grief. Like it never went in order for me. It went back and forth, and it's like I was saying to Chris last night. It's like, at least for me, it feels like I always come to a compromise with myself eventually where I'm like, okay, we can maybe not do this every day now. We can just be sad when we hear that one song or, on their birthday or something like that. You kind of go, okay, I can handle this. I don't need to do this every day.
Right. Yeah, one point on the models of this, whether it's the 5 stages or 7 stages or whatever, is one thing I can certainly chime in with on this is that, all of these are context. These are just models. There's lots of models, and models can help us understand a process, but each of us experiences the process in our own way.
Right.
And this is really important in psychology, is that, you don't use these models or use these ideas in any way to judge yourself as though you're somehow lacking or there's something wrong with you in how you are
Yeah.
necessarily processing information or emotions.
Right. Because there's so many different ways to grieve. It's like, and you're going to grieve differently for each person, each thing, each event, whatever it is that you're grieving. Like, I know for me, when I was 8 and my grandpa died, when my other grandparents first told me what happened, I went into shock. I didn't cry right away. I just sort of went numb, and this is when you're 8, you don't know what to do. But like other people, it was a different reaction. When my friend died 7 years ago, I got a text from a friend that said, "I'm so sorry. I knew you were so close to him." And I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. So I jumped on Facebook and there was the message, right? So I was in the middle of a restaurant and I broke down crying. So it was just a totally different reaction. You don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
So we all go through it differently, And then when my grandma, who I'm estranged from or was estranged from, passed away, we had been estranged for 5 years already. So I had already grieved. So when I heard that she had died, it hurt, but not in the same way it would have hurt if we were still in contact, I think. So it's different. It's interesting how that works.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Have you heard of complicated grief?
Yes, I was
Just about to. Okay, great.
Yeah, gonna kind of bring that up a little bit and then get into it. Yeah, where it's like it keeps getting worse. Yeah. Because I have the 16 ways that people grieve here. So we've got normal grief, the emotional distress that accompanies a trauma, such as a death or a loss. And then there's the complicated grief, the type of grief that worsens over time and just compacts and compounds. And traumatic grief, the grief that you feel after the sudden or unexpected loss of a loved one. Chronic grief, a grief that does not subside. Anticipatory grief, the grief you feel when you are waiting on a loved one to pass. So maybe the kind of anticipatory grief when they're going through Alzheimer's or they're going through cancer and that kind of thing, Disenfranchised grief, deep grief you feel over the loss of a relationship that is outside the typical family structure or other recognized relationships. Distorted grief may give you feelings of guilt and anger. Exaggerated grief starts out as normal grief but grows with intensity as time passes. Masked grief. When experienced, you may not even be aware that symptoms such as anger or impulsive behavior are related to a loss. Yeah. Been there. All right. Inhibited grief can manifest in the form of chronic headaches, stomach pains, or even muscle and body aches. Collective grief, when grief affects a whole community, city, country, or even the world. So I would say 9/11 would count as one of those. COVID. Cumulative grief, when a current loss may dredge up feelings of a loss you have suffered in the past. Yes, that's, I think, at least for me, it seems like when one person passes, it does bring up the other people that have gone kind of feelings,
Mm-hmm.
Prolonged grief, when normal grief lasts for 12 months or longer. Abbreviated grief, a short-lived but bona fide grief. Delayed grief, when your grief may be postponed for a matter of weeks, months, and sometimes years. Absent grief, where you may show few or no signs of grieving. Which is, actually, I haven't ever read it, but my uncle has told me the plot of it a million times, is The Stranger. And apparently I think it's in France, and the guy's mom dies, and he doesn't cry at the funeral, so he gets, they're going after him because of that. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Well,
Yeah.
Alex also had a super chat comment here that he said,
Sure.
he said, I recently learned that grief can come back. Something that happened to me 25 years ago came back, and I am really struggling with it. Grief is PTSD. It simmers below the surface, and it can wake up.
Oh,
He
God.
says.
Yes.
Certainly won't deny any of those points.
No, not at all.
Yep.
And yeah, it is sort of a form of PTSD. I mean, especially the more traumatic the event or death or whatever loss it was, you know, it can be triggered just like PTSD symptoms.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know? Like you hear the right song on the radio, or you smell the right thing, or, you know, you go by that favorite bookstore you used to hang out in or something. It just...
Exactly.
Or someone that looks like them, you know, like, or acts like them can bring that up.
Well, it's interesting, you know, because we talk about triggers,
Yeah.
and things that trigger us, and it's not just in the area of grief that happens. That's actually the process that our brain operates on all the time, when it comes to fight or flight or sensing threat or whatever. But it's interesting how in the grief process it seems to be highlighted or exaggerated a bit because we're so hyper focused on the thoughts that we're having during that process, and other times that other emotions are being experienced or other things are happening, we're not so laser focused inside our heads, you know,
Yeah.
on that. Anyway, just in terms of the triggering and stuff, it's not really that dissimilar to other ways that triggering happens. It's just magnified because of that loss and that deep well of emotion that gets pulled up. So, hey Amanda.
Oh.
Cool. If you don't express grief, does that mean you're suppressing it? I would not say so, because suppressing implies that you're actively, knowingly doing something. Maybe not knowingly, maybe that's not implied in that. So it could be the case, but I would never say it's always the case that if for whatever reason you don't feel you're experiencing an appropriate emotion at an appropriate time, that you're automatically suppressing it. That would be sort of like every time somebody disagrees with me, I just say they're in denial.
Right. That's not fair. Yeah. Yeah. You know, just, you might feel it and still be going through it, but don't feel the desire to show everybody else, you know, that you are, or maybe you just can't, you're not ready to show that side of your grief to everybody else yet.
Right. That's right. Or, you know, one thing that occurs to me with that is that it's processing at a level that you're simply just not hitting on it yet. If it needs to, if that's what's going on with you, then maybe it's just coming up, but it's coming up slower than other things might be. And it might be a day or two or three or a week or a month before it suddenly hits you, you know. Doesn't mean you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. No, and like we were saying, I mean, there is delayed grief, there is absent grief. I've had delayed grief, you know, I was talking about my grandma a minute ago. Yeah, I mean, when it first happened, I was like, okay, I've done all this grieving, it hurts, but not as much as it probably would have. But then, you know, but there's still times where I do feel sad, and I do remember the good times with her. And I think that hit me later. And I know it hit my uncle who was her son. I know it hit him later too. Like, he didn't have the chance to process it when it happened, because it, you know, all this other stuff was going on with the family that was messed up. So we didn't have that chance. So it's just like, it's interesting how it can come up later and hit you. You know, like what I was saying earlier with being hit with the fact that I never grieved the dream. It's like, I didn't know that I needed to do that until it slapped me in the face and said, hey.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, just another point that occurs to me, just to throw it in here, is that also during a loss of a person, maybe somebody close to you, you know, one of the other things that gets mixed up in that is, in addition to the mixed emotions that you might have towards that person, this tends to be a time when we are making contact with other people, sometimes that we haven't heard from or talked to in a very long time.
Yeah.
Family members, you know, old friends, stuff like that, who might be also have been a contact of this person, but not necessarily of yours. And that can enter a whole cocktail of mixed emotions into the brew that can also affect the grieving process. And so it's not necessarily like your grief exists in a vacuum.
No.
And that's also another factor to think about with how we are processing it.
And now you brought that up, it made me think, it's funny too. It's not funny, haha, but like when someone dies, sometimes you learn things about them or accidentally say some things about them that other people didn't know or you didn't know. When my grandpa passed, my grandma found his letters to another woman. When my friend passed and he was living in another state, so all of us in Colorado had our own little memorial thing, and we invited some of his family members to come out for it, just for all his Colorado friends and loved ones and everything. And we both discovered things that we didn't know about him. And then some people who I will never forgive said some things about him to his family that they shouldn't have. So it's interesting, it's weird how stuff comes out like that when someone dies,
Exactly. Exactly. We have a call in the queue as well. So I'm going to pick this up. Christine, I think. All right, picking it up. Hello.
Hi, Christine.
Hi. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you. No, I so appreciate. I wasn't going to call in today, but the topic just drew me in. Grief is like my world. I facilitate support groups for people who have lost loved ones to suicide.
Okay. A noble cause.
Yeah.
I do. Thank you. I agree. I lost my dad to suicide when I was 15 years old. I'm 56 now.
Okay.
And didn't grieve at all in the beginning because of stigma that was surrounding his suicide death. And I believe the stigma, people weren't as open to discuss these things back then in 1980.
That's for sure.
So I believed the stigma, that he was just a selfish guy who made this choice to abandon us.
Mm.
And, nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. And so 17 years later, I kind of grieved again with help, support, and kindness, and understanding. And those stages of grief you read, Mel, what I can share is my understanding and my training that Dr. Kubler-Ross, who wrote those stages of dying, those 5 stages, did so from the perspective of somebody that is facing their own mortality. They go through those 5 stages, and somehow through the years, it got transferred to anybody who's lost someone.
Right,
those are the 5 stages.
Okay.
And those 7 stages in the 16, because I haven't heard those 16 before, which were great, but those are much more in line.
Yeah.
And at the same time, what you're saying is also true, that this is very circular. It's not a linear process
Right.
at all. Some people don't experience any anger. Some people don't experience,
Right.
any guilt.
I'm going to ask you to speak a little more directly into your phone because we're barely hearing you.
Oh, I apologize.
No worries. No worries at all. Just if you could do that. Yeah.
Is that better? Is that better?
A little bit.
A little bit?
A little bit.
I'm walking.
Oh,
I got that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop right here.
Awesome.
So I wanted to call in and just offer to the both of you, I'm sorry that you're feeling Norm Macdonald's loss so greatly.
Thank you.
Yeah, he was very entertaining. That grief, in my opinion, is a spiritual experience. And there is a certain kind of up-leveling that can occur, and even a deepened relationship with the person that you are grieving, even though they have passed on. And I discovered when I had that support and just really allowed myself the time and the exploration that I needed, I came out of it a completely different person. That was hugely grateful. It's another form of loving someone. The love doesn't go away when they've passed on, and it turns into this process. And we so need to talk about it. We need to teach our children about it. We can't be hiding from our kids and or each other. You know, they can't see me crying. You know, I can't believe I'm still crying. It's been 6 months. You know, we can't make judgments on ourselves like that.
Exactly.
And while it is a challenge to talk about, in my experience as well, whenever love is the basis for whatever we're talking about, it becomes a lot, it's less challenging and more welcoming, and allows for a lot more diverse thoughts and exchanges of ideas, which is always a good thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Always a good thing. And it honors my father every time I do that. My friend who also died of suicide, plus all the other, you know, losses and animals and, you know, that have affected us, including dreams, you know, that have affected most of us.
Yeah.
So I'd like to just offer that, to not be afraid, don't be alone, and because you're not alone, and put the hand out there. It's important. It's important to do it. So thank you very much for the topic and for letting me share my thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, thank you very much for calling in and sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Very nice. And yes, we see Lois here in the comments as well, just kind of pissed, and understandably so.
Yes. I mean, that's very frustrating when you know someone could have done something differently and they didn't, you know?
Right.
It's very maddening.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was thinking too, with that cause, another thing that I learned from a therapist was there's sort of a beauty in grief, because sometimes when, especially if someone dies, not only do you learn things about them you may not have known before, but sometimes it brings gifts into your life that are unexpected, you know, like when my friend passed away 7 years ago, because of that, I reconnected with someone he knew in the past. And that person invited me to a party later on. And I ran into someone there that I never wanted to see again, because that person had hurt me so bad. But when I saw that person again, it was sort of healing, because I realized this person had changed and they weren't that person that hurt me anymore. And I would have never gotten that chance if my friend had not passed away, you know, because I wasn't in touch with those same people anymore. Like, you know, we were saying, you know, old friends you haven't seen in a million years. And so that was beautiful, you know, like I got to have a moment of healing because of that. And she was right, you know, sometimes things happen because of death that you need.
That is true. That is true. So did you have anything else you wanted to cover?
Yeah, I've got some ways that you can kind of help yourself. By no means is this exhaustive, but if you are feeling grief, take it gently, do whatever it needs, however much time you need. Don't give yourself a deadline. You will grieve as long as you need to grieve. Expect and accept some reduction in your usual efficiency and consistency. You are not going to perform the way you perform when you have normal emotions. Try to avoid taking on new responsibilities or making major life decisions for a time. Yeah.
Yeah. And this goes right in line with the cult stuff, guys.
Yeah, that's when they get you. That's when you're down, you know?
Yeah. When you are experiencing major emotional, overwhelming emotional events or trauma or massive change and uncertainty in your life is when you are most vulnerable to being preyed upon. Whether it's by a cult or whether it's by some human predator or whether it's by some, scam or something, this is definitely the time to experience the process, but not let your guard down in doing so.
Exactly. You want to talk regularly about your grief and your memories with someone you trust, someone that will listen to you, someone that will let you repeat the same stupid story over and over again, that will let you cry on their shoulder and all that kind of thing. Accept help and support when offered. Be particularly attentive to maintaining healthy eating and sleeping patterns. Try to exercise moderately and regularly. You can keep a journal, which can be very helpful. And once, I would say with that too, don't give yourself rules about journaling and how that needs to be done. Like what form. If you just want to write fuck a million times, if that makes you feel better, there's no right way to journal.
Right.
Whatever makes you feel better. Read. There are many helpful books on grief. Some are listed. Well, never mind. That's something okay. But you can go online and just look up grief books. There's a million of them. And then there's always reviews. Plan and allow yourself to enjoy some good times without any guilt. The goal is balance. You can carry or wear a linking object like a bracelet or something, a keepsake that symbolically reminds you of your loss, but anticipate the time in the future when you no longer need to carry this reminder and gently let it go. Tell those around you what helps you and what doesn't. Most people would like to help if they know how. You can take warm, leisurely baths. It's a good idea to see a counselor. You can get massages. You can set aside time to remember and experience whatever feelings arise with the memories, just a little specific private time for you. Choose your entertainment carefully. You don't need to watch all the movies with all the sad stuff.
In other words, you don't need to re-traumatize yourself.
Yeah. Join a support group. There are hundreds of such groups, and people have a wonderful capacity to help each other. This is very true. You can plan for special days and holidays and anniversaries. Feelings can be particularly intense. Christmas, that's a hard one for people. If you're into it, pray or meditate or, whatever makes you feel better in that way. You can take a yoga class. You can connect on the internet with grief support groups. But you need to vent your anger in healthy ways. Don't hold it back. You can do exercising things like walking or tennis. If you're spiritual, speak to your spiritual leader. Plant yourself in nature and do something to help someone else. And then write down your lessons, because healthy grieving will have much to teach you, like we were talking about before. You're going to learn some things while you're going through this process.
Exactly. If I might chime in also, I've been reading some Erich Fromm lately, and if there is somebody who really had some insightful things to say about social psychology, it's Erich Fromm. And I finally took John Atack up on his reference to this guy, because Fromm's the guy who came up with malignant narcissism as a concept. But he, it just so happens in reading him that there's some things you were just talking about that parallel. And one of the points I'd like to make is that we tend as human beings to get busy, make ourselves busy, give ourselves busy work, keep our hands in motion, keep our bodies in motion during times of anger, stress, anxiety, and grief. And that's fine. That's actually some of the coping mechanisms that she was just talking about. But I would like to emphasize that those motions or activities alone are just part of this process. And if you try to put it all into that and not deal with the emotional side or the memory side, then it can turn into a suppression of emotion and a situation of denial, which I think we all want to avoid, which is why I'm bringing it up. So it's not that you have to bury your, there's no right way to do it, except there are wrong ways to do it. And one of those is to deny or suppress, as we have gone over. So, so there's a back and forth, there's a balance here. It's really looking at the entire list and not just taking a couple things and going, well, I'll do this, but I'm sure as hell not going to talk to that person or deal with this emotion or, get that therapy or whatever. No way, right? And you could be denying yourself, some relief by doing that. So
yeah, and you don't want to do that. You have to, that's why it's important, I think, to do things like connect with people that also knew that person or cared about that thing, like support groups are very helpful too, because you can grieve together and you can talk about that and everyone knows where you're at with that. And
exactly,
it's healing. You can have all those good memories. You can be like, remember the time that Joe did that thing,
Exactly. and that's also part of being human, right? Is actually leaning on and relying on other people. It's not a solo activity. Life is not a solo activity, and neither is processing grief. It really does help to have that other person to bounce off of, and they will say things or could indicate things along the way that you just simply will not see in yourself or in the situation. So it's always helpful to have that.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I think we're going to start moving towards wrapping that up because we've got some calls to take. And so we're going to do that. David, I think.
All right, David.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Hi, David. Welcome to the show again.
Yeah. It's great to be back. Yes. It's a difficult topic really to talk about, I think, because my worry when I saw the topic tonight was that we might end up in some kind of competitive pity party, and I'm glad that hasn't happened.
Yeah, I didn't want that.
No.
Yeah. It's been an interesting discussion so far. Yeah, I think you hit on a good point there about people who keep just keeping themselves busy. I have a friend who found out that her friend had terminal cancer, and what did she keep doing at the time? She just kept cleaning the house as if nothing happened.
Right.
Initially, just to keep herself busy, just to avoid confronting what she just heard. I mean, that's definitely true. That definitely happens.
Yep, exactly. And it's it's expected, it's predictable, so we can anticipate it and then work with it, not instead of the, you shouldn't be doing that. Instead it's more of the and let's also do this other thing, kind of thing. So you're not making the person feel horrible about feeling horrible.
Right.
Yeah. I think the other thing is that people are, understandably, they're often very hesitant to talk to somebody who's just received bad news because we don't know how anyone's going to react in that situation. But at the same time, they would I think in most cases, they'd probably rather talk to somebody than be left on their own.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think people just, they don't always know what to do or say, so they're just like, I just won't do it, and that's sad because people end up grieving all by themselves because their friends and family don't know what to do,
Yeah, that can happen.
Yeah, I mean, there was this case, and there's a show many years ago in Britain called Educating Ethics, where they went to a quote-unquote failing school, and they just observed them like a reality show and interviewed them for a while. And I mean, a lot of the kids were fine. There was this one kid who was a model student until I think it was his uncle died, and he went off the rails because he couldn't process it because they'd been quite close. And I mean, if you hadn't known that, you'd probably just thought he was a bad kid or something, but it was grief, and he didn't know how to deal with it, and there wasn't really much of a support system in the school, and I don't think there really is to this day, unfortunately. And like, grief can hit you at any time in your life. One of my classmates died when I was 5. So my entire school, we all had to come to terms with that very, very young. But there's not very much support, I don't think, for kids whenever they encounter this for the first time at all.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we have the potential for more support now than we've had when you and I were in school. Because I think, I think there's more attention paid to it, but that's really like saying, well, there's one thumb in the dam, compared to maybe what we would like to see, Yeah. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's the unfortunate thing. More support is a very low bar when we look at what things used to look like.
Yeah.
I remember you mentioned very briefly in the book where the author wrote at the end, any man who doesn't cry at his mother's funeral is liable to be condemned to death. That book was L'étranger, The Outsider by Albert Camus, and the plot itself more or less took it literally. He killed someone arguably in self-defense, but the trial didn't focus on that whatsoever. The prosecutor and even the judge, this is set in 1950s Algeria, just before the French Code out, and the guy being tried was a Frenchman, actually. So the judge and the prosecutor spent most of the time saying, of course he's a cold-blooded killer because his mother died 3 days ago and he didn't cry at the funeral.
Right.
And that was the entire course of the trial. Yeah.
Wow.
So the afterword, which Camus wrote, started with that line, whoever doesn't cry at his mother's funeral is liable to be condemned to death. Obviously, the story that he wrote took that line very literally, but the point he made throughout the rest of the afterword was that society, certainly at the time he was writing in, I think it was the 60s, society had a very, very strict way of how you should feel about, almost everything, and not just grief. Grief was the one who chose to explore that.
Interesting.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I think it's better today, as you guys were saying, but it's like there is still sort of this, you're supposed to do it this way or you're wrong,
Yes,
when
the
it
judgment
comes to
factor.
certain emotions and experiences. And
Exactly. All right, David, I'm going to have to let you go because we have another call in the queue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're moving toward wrapping up, so I'm gonna wrap you up. But I really appreciate you calling in this week, and thank you for that book reference too, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Very welcome.
Awesome. Talk to you, man. Bye bye.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
All right, cool. And we'll pick up this call here. Mary, I believe. Hello, Mary.
Hi.
Hi, you are on. Welcome to the show.
Yes, hi. How are you?
I'm all
Good,
right.
good,
How are
good.
you?
Hi, Melissa.
Hello.
Well, I just wanted to discuss when I was a child. I found my mother committed suicide, and I found her when I was 3 years old.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
No.
sorry.
Sorry, yeah. Ugh.
Yes, and that has affected me. I remember everything, and I was in shock. When I was 3, I couldn't understand why my brothers and sisters were crying, and I couldn't cry. I didn't cry. And I was just in shock at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And this has affected me, this trauma, all my life. And grief. I have grieved my mom all my life. And I have not been able to celebrate. I don't feel like worthy of my birthdays or holidays. Mother's Day is horrible. I mean, I have gone to therapy, but my family's way was just sweeping it under the rug and not really speaking about it.
Right.
So, as an adult, I went to therapy, but I still deal with grieving very much so.
Yeah.
My father died when I was 14, so by 16 I was out there working and on my own.
Wow.
Got it.
Yeah, and subsequently, when my daughter was in high school, I started to go to school again, and I became a nurse for Alzheimer's patients. And in the honor of my parents, I took care of these patients the best of my ability in their home, and I did this for 25 years. Home care for Alzheimer's patients in their memory.
Wow. That's dedication.
amazing.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So it's grieving is very difficult, and I grieved a long time, and I feel, in a sense, that I wasted a lot of my time grieving. You know, and I just right now, I do feel more at peace, that they are at peace. And, that's it. That's all I could do. I know, my mother had mental illness, and obviously I think she had postpartum depression. And at the time in the 60s, that wasn't addressed.
No, it was not. Not back then.
No.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
We've learned so much in the last few decades. We have
Thankfully,
learned so much, and we have so far
Yes.
still to go.
We have.
Yeah.
We have. But, yeah. So I had called previously and spoken to Melissa about the vagus nerve. Now,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
that's why, it affected my vagus nerve. I never knew about this condition until I went to my gastroenterologist, and they told me the reason why I get sick so often. I get very emotional. I am an empath, and I feel everything. So I get very emotional, yes, and sometimes I get ill, to the point that I get ill. So knowing about my illness, where it was coming from, was very helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Big
But I
time.
can sympathize with everybody that is grieving, is going through grief. I could sympathize with them because I'm there,
Yeah.
and I have been there. Yes, but I just wanted to, just give you my input, and thank you for having this topic.
Absolutely.
You're
Because a
very
lot
welcome.
of people are, a lot of people are grieving out there, and they need to share it and talk about it,
That's right.
because it comes out in life. If you hide it one way or another, it creeps out, and you have to deal with it.
Big time.
Right.
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
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 That's right. Well, thank you
Well,
very much for
yes.
calling
Thank
in.
you
We
so
really
much.
appreciate it.
Yes, and I
Yes,
hope
thank
your
you,
healing
guys.
continues.
Yes. Thank you, Melissa.
You're
And you as
welcome.
well.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night.
You
Good
too.
night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. I will definitely emphasize what she said there about how it's going to come out some other way. The thing about your emotions
Oh,
is
yeah.
you think you're suppressing them. See, there's a little bit of a delusion there.
Yeah.
Just amongst us girls, just so we're all clear about
Right?
this.
It'll come out in some way or the other.
Yeah, it can. You can be passive aggressive with yourself, and your ego responds. It's quite something. Yes. Anyway, thank you all the callers who called in tonight. We really appreciate your input on this. And of course, thank you, baby, for putting this
You
all
are
together.
welcome. Yes.
Yep. I did want to address a couple of questions that came up in the comments while we were going. I think Xyan asks, how does grief relate to depression? How does one know if or when some form of help is needed, either by the person themselves or by another person? Do you have an answer to that?
So, okay.
It's
Read it.
well, it's a little earlier in the thing here, but I wrote it down here.
Oh, okay.
If you can see that. How does grief relate to depression?
Okay. Yeah, I would say grief can cause depression. It's sort of in the same realm as depression. You know, but it's not always depression, you know, because there's been times when I've been going through grief and I didn't have a depressive episode, but then there's been times where I've gone through grief and did. So they're not exactly the same thing, but I definitely think that grief can cause it and put you in that state and make you go there. And I'm sure when you're depressed, it's easy to bring grief back up, you know, because you're thinking sad things and then you're like, oh yeah, all these people are dead, you know, and then you feel really sad. And so I think they kind of feed off each other.
Well, for sure. I think that I think if you're looking for a differentiation point or a point where maybe something is a regular process of grief or a regular cycle of grief that anybody would experience versus, you know, okay, something else is going on here.
Yeah.
I think what you'd be looking for there is either duration of the feelings and also the strength and frequency of it and the appropriateness of it, because there comes a point where you're going to start thinking, I'm kind of over this now, and yet these feelings aren't going away, or something's not quite totally making sense about this in the way these are connecting for me. This is not other people telling you what to think about yourself, but if you're thinking that or you're feeling that, you might be moving into something else than just your regular grief process. And that's where I would, you know, get educated, consult with a professional, stuff like that to look into that. And then the other question that came up since we're wrapping up the show here is, am I going to interview Aaron Smith-Levin about his, because yes, he announced this week, it's done. He's shooting for city council of Clearwater. And absolutely, I'm going to be trying to do that. So
awesome.
Yeah, so that won't happen this week, but yeah, I'm definitely going to try to interview Aaron about that. All right, so that all being said, let us do our card of the week.
Yeah.
I've already told you guys, and I will say again, I'm taking the weekend off, so there is no podcast or Q&A show this week. You get a break from me this weekend. You can look at it that way. A feature-filled weekend of fun for you, because you won't have to deal with Chris Shelton, soapboxing at you.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Okay. Pick a card, any card.
Oh, I think we've done Straw Man before.
We have. If you want to pull just one more time.
Appeal to nature.
Oh, okay. Appeal to nature. Okay, appeal to nature. This is a logical fallacy. This is fallacious thinking. Okay, don't do this. Making the argument that because something is natural, it is therefore valid, justified, inevitable, good, or ideal. Just because it's natural. The medicine man rolled into town on his bandwagon offering various natural remedies, such as very special plain water. He said that it was only natural that people should be wary of artificial medicines such as antibiotics. So, yeah, just because it's natural. Arsenic is natural.
Yeah.
100% natural.
So is poison ivy.
100%. And you know how much fun it is to roll around and poison that 100% organic poison ivy. Oh, I'm sure you guys can come up with your own examples of that nonsense. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for coming around. We did go over a bit, but this was fun. And on that happy note, I will see you guys next week.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.